Hello and welcome to Back to the Fundamentals. We have many attendees today, results users and decision makers from all over North America. This webinar is going to be about 30 minutes, and thank you for spending some of your valuable time with us today. Please chat in where you're from so we can make sure that the chat function is working on the webinar. And also, please chat in your questions today. If we're not able to integrate them into the webinar and answer them directly, somebody will reach out to you and get that information for you. Also, you will get a recording of this webinar in your email tomorrow. Today, you're going to see how fundamentals plus strategy equals results. When you refocus on your core values, your key goals, your core processes, measuring those processes, and then creating accountability, you get uncommon results. My name is Emmanuel Rose, and I'm part of the marketing team here at Mass Ingenuity. We're based in Portland, Oregon, and we've been helping small and large enterprises capture and implement strategic plans and change management for over 11 years. We've also developed an amazing software and planning processes to clarify your KPIs, generate the plan, and track the results you need to be successful. Chat in your questions at any time about your biggest or smallest challenges with fundamentals, planning, or tracking. This webinar is for you, and I want to make sure you get what you need and get your questions answered. Today's presenters are from the Online Business Systems team. Online combines the best technology, business, and security practices and leads clients through the transformation process by embracing the client's vision and the challenge of creating something new and then push the boundaries to deliver. Online's team today is Chris Harper, Mike Poitras, and Carl Schwab, and Tara Flatt is the moderator. Tara and panelists, let's get into it.
Perfect. Thank you, Emmanuel, and thank you for having us today. We're really excited to be here and to hit on a topic that we think is just so prevalent to what so many organizations in all industries have been experiencing, not only in the last year and a half, but challenges that are still facing you all today and are going to be facing organizations for the coming months and year. So, in the past year, there's been immense change, good and bad, and I'm sure that everybody on the call has experienced some kind of change within their day-to-day operations. Priorities have gotten scrambled, and there's more uncertainty to come. And the three panelists that we have today have definitely experienced that, lived and breathed that for the last year and a half in helping support our clients in delivery and helping them through a lot of those challenges. So today we wanted to have a conversation around, first of all, how the fundamentals of your business have changed and how you can identify that. But more importantly, to help provide actionable steps and tools and tactics that you can take back to your organization to help regroup, reevaluate, and reinvigorate your strategy in moving forward to more uncertainty. And as many of you on the call know today, there are some really great tools out there as well to help support, reinvigorating and adjusting your strategy, as well as helping to monitor and to manage the measures that really matter. So Mass Ingenuity, they have their amazing results framework and software, which we are very excited to be advocates for. And, we'll talk about that a little bit later. But, what we hope for you to get out of the session today is if you are someone who's currently using results, we hope that this is an opportunity and an encouragement for you to reflect on any change that you have experienced in your business in the past year and a half, and to understand if that change is reflected in your strategy and how you're currently using results. And for anyone who currently isn't using results right now, or if you're looking to start taking these steps, we hope that first of all, this is an opportunity to open up your perspective to the importance and the value of aligning your operating processes and strategic initiatives, helping you to find that balance between working in your business and working on your business. And second of all, giving you the opportunity and a bit of an introduction to our partners over at Mass Ingenuity. So with that being said, I'd like to turn it over to our panelists. So we'll get a bit of an intro from each of you before we start off on our formal panel discussion. So maybe Chris, let's start with you. Would you mind walking us through just a little bit of who you are, what you do? Go
Yeah,
ahead.
sure. So I'm Chris Harper. I'm with Online Business Systems. I'm the Senior Director for our Digital Advisory Services offering, where what we'll talk about today is part of what we actually do. Our team in Digital Advisory Services, we help clients understand where they are today, where they want to be in the future, and then we help them define a transformation journey between those 2 points, obviously working very hard to make sure that they get through that with as few sleepless nights as possible, and so that success is achieved for the organization. And so that's a little bit about me and the Digital Advisory Services team at Online Business Systems.
Perfect. Thanks, Chris. Carl, why don't we go over to you next?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Hey, Carl Schwab here. I'm a principal consultant at the Digital Advisory Services team. That's the same team that Chris is managing. And I have a slightly different role. I mean, I do lead clients through the business transformation change. That's my primary responsibility, but I also spend time with them in the glue during that transformation as well. So I've actually gotten to see firsthand how people have been able to adapt their businesses over the last year and a half.
Perfect. And Mike, last but not least, why don't you go ahead?
Good, thanks, Tara. Yes, hi everyone. My name is Mike Poitras, and I'm the Director of Project Services within the Digital Transformation practice at Online Business Systems. And I was very much involved in the setup and implementation of the results management framework and software within our practice, which we did last year in the middle of 2020. So I'm very involved in the day-to-day operations and use of the products that you're about to hear about today. Back to you, Tara.
Perfect. So now that we all know who we have here in the room today, let's start off. So maybe Chris, let's start with you. So based on your experience, being out in the field and really experiencing, what our clients are going through on a day-to-day right now, what have you seen that has really fundamentally changed within our client environments when you look back kind of to the start of the pandemic forward?
Yeah, I think the most substantial change has been, I think, the amount of uncertainty, right? There's a lot of noise, there's a lot of opinions, there's a lot of unpredictability around the future, which there always is. It's just that future has become more volatile, and the cadence of that volatility has been increased substantially. And so, obviously the big topic now that's caused a lot of change is the whole pandemic situation. Some parts of the world are feeling like they're getting out of it. Others thought they were getting out of it or going back into it. Others are still in it and not even out of it at least once or twice. And so there's a lot of confusion. And that really comes into the bubble of management, where management is accountable for the performance of the organization. And it needs to ensure that there's alignment between how the organization is constructed and measured and what's expected of the organization to be produced on the outside. And that brings into this the question of customers. Many organizations are thinking right now, where should we be? Like, should we untransform and go back to the way things were prior to the pandemic? Or have things changed so permanently that we need to look at the future and define a different future that isn't the past and take steps towards that? And organizations that are faced with that question should be asking, where are our customers and how have our customers changed? Because how the customer change is how the organization needs to change in order to make sure that it continues to add value to those customers, and those customers pay for that value to create reciprocal value inside of the organization. And if your customers have changed their behaviors, if they have changed their needs and desires, if they are doing more digital engagement, for example, rather than traditional bricks and mortar, this is a very good signal that it's time for the organization to look at its priorities, look at its strategy, and look at its business model and make sure that those things are aligned with what the customer expects from the organization. And not just expects from the past perspective, but expects from the future, right? Where the customers are. They expect the businesses they purchase from to be with them. And when those businesses are not, you're going to lose customers. And a very simple example I would give would be my boxing studio. When the pandemic began, they took what were physical classes in a physical space, brought them online. And then at some points in the pandemic, it looked like things were going to return to normal. And what happened was our boxing studio discontinued those digital channels and reverted back to the former business model of being in a physical space. Of course, depending on where you are, you know what happened in that scenario. The pandemic came back and restrictions were reintroduced, and the boxing studio, unfortunately, by that point had lost customers, including myself, because I was about creating a behavior and creating a pattern and a habit in myself which wasn't compatible with the volatility of how they were providing their services. And that's just a very simple sort of, entrepreneurial perspective around this pivot, but a really important one, because they lost customers, because they disengaged in how the customers expected to be involved and to experience their product and their service offering. And so really important that when you're asking about how your organization is aligned and modeled, that you're aligning it to where your customers are today and staying very close to your customers. And then, of course, if you're changing who your customers are and the expectations they have of your business, you need to look inside of your business around how things are constructed and modeled and measured to make sure that you are measuring the new business model and that you're ensuring its performance. Because if you don't have measurements associated with that, if you're only relying on financial performance as your key measurement for organizational success, that is very metaphorically like driving a vehicle with your front seats actually facing the back of the vehicle while you're trying to steer the steering wheel behind your back. That's what managing the organization by financial statements feels like. You need to have predictive indicators that show you're aligned with your customers, that identify constraints that are affecting or calling attention to them to be resolved so that you're able to satisfy your customers better. And so contextually, those are some of the challenges facing organizations right now, but it starts with knowing your customer and making sure that your organization is walking beside your customer and not walking backwards to the past away from where your customer has moved to. So that's what I would say about that, Tara.
Perfect. Thank you, Chris. I feel like you have such a good way of putting so many of these concepts into really visual perspectives. Like now I'm thinking about driving a car backwards, and
don't do it, not recommended.
Perfect. Well, Carl, I'm curious, based on your experience in a similar space but a different role, do you have anything to add on to what Chris said about that topic? I really liked the points about the, being close to your customers, because if they change, your business changes. So I'd be curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, it's interesting, Chris, you talked about that fitness facility. I have a friend who runs a high performance training facility for Olympic athletes and for NHL players. And he has a few different facilities, someone in Winnipeg and other parts of the country. And it's very interesting is that, even they were trying to really manage their COVID exposure. And he actually started to move to online classes. He's got some very professional kinesthetic trained individuals, and they started to put these things out online in sort of a private virtual lessons. And he's found that by and far, many of these athletes much preferred this service to his original service, so much so that he's actually getting rid of some of his bricks and mortar spaces because he thinks this is going to be the way of the future. He's actually making a better margin. It's a much better thing for him. I was also talking to an individual here in town who had several restaurants, and we all know that we weren't allowed to eat in restaurants, right? That's very exciting. It's unfortunate, a lot less date night kind of scenarios. But what this individual did to adapt to the situation was he eliminated the front part or the seating area of his restaurant, converted it into some more of a massive kitchen or a more higher production kitchen scenario, and teamed up with some of the many delivery services that are out there just to start, increasing his throughput in delivery services. And he's found that overall, he didn't have any negative impact, even though most restaurants did find that this was a situation. So there's a lot of discussion going on within the group and his leadership team. There's, maybe going back doesn't make sense. Maybe that's not something that we will ever do. Maybe we will just continue to be a dark restaurant or with the lights are out in the front end. So it's kind of interesting. A couple of different scenarios there.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. There's been a lot of shift, and kind of on that front, thank you so much for your response, Chris. And Carl, kind of diving a bit deeper into that of, we understand now there's been a change in, where your customers are and how you're able to serve them. And that might look very different than it did a year ago. So based on your experience and in previous work that you've done in this space, what do you typically recommend for organizations? What kind of steps or tactics do you recommend in order to get back on track and to realign their strategy to where their customers are and how their core business has changed?
Yeah, there's several steps, and this is really much in alignment with those of you who already are customers of Mass Ingenuity and have gone through the results management system. You will be familiar with a lot of these steps, but it's so true. You need to get back to the fundamentals. The first thing that I like to advocate for is to take a look at your mission, vision, and core values. Have they changed? Have you experienced mission creep? Are you even the same organization that you were before? Are you producing the same products? Are you producing the same services? And as Chris said, are you serving the same clients? You could be completely different organization. Further, there's been a lot of staff disruption during the pandemic as well. You may have lost leaders, especially now we're seeing sort of this prevalence of sort of this great resignation kind of concept going on right now. We're seeing a lot of people who didn't leave their jobs for 2 years, they held on, but because of the uncertainty, they're starting to leave. Organizations, leadership skills are leaving, new leaders are joining. Does everybody have a similar understanding of what the organization even is? It's probably a really good time to revisit that as a starting point and make sure that's circulated amongst your leadership team to make sure, and even probably your entire organization, to make sure that everybody's on the same page, bring people into alignment from that perspective. And that's also true as well for the goals that you established for yourselves and the outcomes that determine what it means to have achieved those goals. Those things could have changed very much. Are they still valid? Are you still driving towards the same outcomes? It's probably time to put these on paper if you haven't done it before. But even if you have done it, it's time to take a fresh new look at this from the perspective of the new world order. And then, take a look at, like I mentioned, what you have done, what you are doing to drive value for your customers every day, the processes that you execute. Those may have changed. You may have added a whole bunch of new processes. You may have eliminated processes. You may have those lame processes that are still running out there that you're doing, but you don't even know why you're doing them anything anymore, that you're not actually, the outputs that those processes are generating are not actually being used for anything. This is a really good opportunity to take at least a high level look-see across the organization, get your leadership team together again and say, what do we do for a living? What's the scope of that? What's not the scope of that? And really take a good hard look at that, because what in my experience so far in businesses that I've worked with is that has changed. That is different now. It's not the same thing. It's nuanced. Even if it looks similar at the top level, there's a nuance, a difference that needs to be discussed and needs to be understood. And it needs to be agreed to and understood by the entire leadership team. And that'll be particularly important for any new leaders that have come on to make sure that they understand, what is, what was, what is, and what will be.
Yeah, and I just want to add, Carl, I just want to emphasize your point around the leadership team. You can have the world's greatest strategy, you can understand your customers perfectly, but lack of agreement on the priorities from the leadership team will create fissures that go all the way throughout the organization and can create confusion, random acts of improvement, as Aaron and the crew would often say, and a lot of wasted energy, effort, and talent. And so that cohesion at the leadership team is so important, that management understands that management as a team is accountable for the performance of the organization. No single manager is accountable for one piece and not others. That entire management team needs to work together. And I just wanted to emphasize that important point.
Yeah, I've seen some more siloed mentality become prevalent in organizations that are in survival mode. People are concerned for their own welfare and their own jobs, and they start to recede into their own little silos and departments as they start to protect those kingdoms. And so I think that's something that this kind of relook, this revitalization, this reinspection of these basics or these foundations is a great team building opportunity. It's important to people to understand where they really are now holistically from an organization perspective, and to try and get back, like you said, on that same team, that one team, not many teams or individual people. And finally, what I'd like to say is that what I've seen is that some organizations, they need to take a peek look. You talked about metrics that would let you look forward, and versus metrics that are behind you, so lagging leading indicators. At least from a process perspective, when they're looking at the leading indicators, I found that some of the measures that are out there these days are, like, now not valid anymore. People are measuring things. It didn't give them any insight to what was going wrong or what was happening. They were not effective measures to begin with. They were sort of red herrings that were in their ecosystem to begin with. So this is a really good opportunity to actually say, hey, so which ones actually provided me value in this last 18 months or 24 months of turbulence? And is there something better that I can place there, something more meaningful and valuable? Or is this just the opportunity to cull the herd? And can I, start reducing my Christmas tree of lights that I'm looking at into something a little bit more streamlined, a little bit easier to interpret and understand?
Perfect. Thank you, Carl. And I really liked, the comments around measuring things that don't matter. And Chris, you highlighted it. I think you hit the nail on the head. A conversation that I think we've been hearing so much is this concern over not having enough resources or time or talent. And, those are valuable pieces of an organization right now that you don't have the luxury of being able to use where they're not needed. So I think that's a really, really great point. And Mike, I'm curious, I know you had mentioned, we've been taking some of these steps internally. Do you have any thoughts on, even from our perspective, how that might have really helped online out as an organization?
Yeah, sure. I'd like to build on the comments that Carl made, because like I said in my introduction, we as a leadership team bought into the results management framework in 2020. So this is just when the pandemic started. And as a leadership team, we spent a lot of time and put a lot of effort into developing our fundamentals, our outcomes, and the processes that we had in place to support those. And the output was a fundamental map. And those of you on the call today who have gone through this exercise know that the value that brings to an organization. So, we went through that exercise, and lo and behold, the pandemic really took hold and things started turning upside down. And a year later, 13 months later, we are in the exact position that Carl just described, and that is we are now revisiting what we created, only 13 or 14 months ago. And there are changes that we didn't plan, but changes that were created by the external factors around us have done exactly what Carl described. Now, we didn't do a fundamental shift in our business. I mean, our mission, vision, and values are all the same. Our key goals are the same. They haven't changed. But I can tell you that outcomes may not have changed, but the priority of the outcomes certainly did. And we're now focusing on outcomes that 12 or 13 months ago might not have been, I don't want to say important, but they weren't a key focus area for us because they were stable, they were predictable, and all of a sudden the outcomes that used to be those rock solid things we could depend on, it's not the case, right? So we've had to change our focus and do exactly what Carl just described. So we're going through this exercise right now where we are doing exactly what we're talking about today, and that is, doing a regroup, a reset, and adjusting to the market around us and the challenges that this new world is throwing at us.
Yeah, we definitely are. I'm excited to hear more about that. But we have a few more minutes of the panel here left. And Mike, I'm curious from your perspective. Carl, you've done a great job really highlighting some of these steps. And the challenge I think always comes in taking that strategy that you build and actually putting it into play and making it happen. So Mike, based on your experience, based on what you've seen, what kind of tips or tricks or steps would you recommend someone take to be able to operationalize that strategy, especially kind of amid the uncertainty that we're expecting?
Yeah, just a couple things in the few minutes we have left that I would like to highlight. So Carl touched on it, but I'll reinforce it anyways, and that is make sure that the measures that have changed or have become more important become an area of focus. So make sure that there is accountability tied to those measures. And when I say that, I'm talking about, are the owners of those measures clearly defined? Are those measures properly being measured and at the right frequency? Do we have action plans in place if the measures are not performing to what the organization requires? So, those kinds of things have to become a focus. And again, don't rely on what was the case, again, in our case, 12, 13 months ago. Focus on what's important now based on the demands of the environment in which you're operating. And then again, communication, I think, is really important, as it always is. And again, I talked about the fundamental map earlier, and I'll talk about it again, that it is a very powerful tool that you can use within the entire organization. So, don't be scared to alter it, make the changes required, and again, share it. Make sure it's communicated properly within the organization so that everyone in the organization sees the changes and understands how they can contribute to the greater good and to improve the measures that are most important to the organization. So those are the kinds of things that we do on an ongoing basis from an operational perspective when you are buying into the results management methodology, but even more important now.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mike. And I'm curious, Chris, I feel like you always do such a good job of tying things up. So do you have any closing thoughts for us today before we kind of end off this formal part of the panel? Anything to end it off with?
I'll just very simply tie some of these little pearls of knowledge together. What matters to your customer should matter to your organization. What matters to your organization should be measured, and what's measured, as we've all heard this cliche, gets managed. When you only measure in order to manage without the prioritization of customers in your organization, you end up with that Christmas tree effect of measurements that Carl talked about. And so what matters to your customers should matter to you. What matters to you should be measured, and what gets measured gets managed. And that's essentially, I think, what we're saying. And it's good to do that gut check, right? To make sure that we're still in alignment with our customers, that we have internal alignment with producing the outputs that our customers expect of us. And measurement is a very key way to enable management teams to work together in a cohesive way so that they're addressing the constraints and then truly unleashing the power of performance from the organization by being good at the fundamentals and delivering what customers expect today, not yesterday. And so that's what I would say, just to summarize it. And if at any point anyone in the webinar watching this live or watching this afterwards wants to reach out to the Mass Ingenuity or the online team to have a conversation, we'd be really happy to do that. We're very excited and passionate about these topics. And so please feel free to connect with us at any time. We're very happy and friendly to have a conversation with you. And so I'll hand it over to you, Emmanuel, for the wrap up there, sir.
All right, well, that was an outstanding review of how to go through and review core values and goals and processes, and not just measuring, but why you want to measure. And I love that, Chris, about measuring for its own sake is not valuable, but to serve your clients, and how you are able to manage your business to serve your clients is really what we are trying to do in our organization. So that was excellent summary. And Tara, thanks for keeping everybody on track and focused. We had a great conversation. We had we're on time. People are going to be emailing with some questions. We'll make sure that those get followed up with. And I hope everybody has a very productive rest of the day and rest of the week, and we'll see you soon.